Hello everyone, and welcome back to Deep Chronicles World. I know many of you use these videos to help you relax and fall asleep, so before you drift off, let's do something fun. Take a moment to leave a comment and share where in the world you're listening from. I'd love to hear from you. If you're enjoying the stories, don't forget to like the video and hit that subscribe button, it really helps. Now, let's get cozy, unwind, and dive into tonight's tale. Ready? Let's begin. I don't know where to begin with this patient. I really don't. I guess I'll just start at the beginning. In 2016, a serial killer began to operate in Aleppo. The sheer scale of destruction and chaos affecting the region provided cover for his actions, as did his victim profile. This individual only targeted soldiers. The murderer showed no preference as to the allegiance of his victims. The fighters belonged to myriad forces, including the Syrian government, various rebel factions, ISIL, Russia, and the United States, among others. In fact, the only reason investigative bodies were able to connect these murders in the first place was because of the killer's bizarre modus operandi. He tore each victim's throat out with his own teeth, then removed their hearts immediately post-mortem. The few witnesses that investigators managed to locate all claimed that prior to each murder, they heard the deafening laughter of a hyena. The perpetrator's base of operations was discovered when a woman who had previously considered herself sympathetic to his cause reported him after he killed her brother, a soldier who fought with the Syrian Liberation Front. She notified a U.S. soldier with whom her brother had been close. Shortly thereafter, soldiers ambushed the abandoned structure in which the suspect was reported to live. Upon entry, they discovered a scene of almost unimaginable horror. The remains of 9 soldiers in various stages of decomposition lay around the floor. The victims all wore the blood-caked remains of military uniforms. Each of their throats were torn out. Each of their chest cavities were open, their rib cages popped to expose the organs within. Each and every one had had their heart removed. Their hearts, along with the remains of dozens of others in various stages of decay, had been arranged along the north wall of the structure. When the suspect finally emerged, he appeared innocuous, a middle-aged man who was thin to the point of emaciation, with multiple injuries and a ghastly wound in his chest. The soldiers opened fire. According to the survivors, the frail man transformed into a monster. The bullets did not even faze this creature, let alone kill it. Through sheer luck and accident, the soldiers managed to lure the creature into an armored vehicle without touching him. Once trapped, the creature shrank back down into the shape of a frail man. With great difficulty and several casualties, the man was eventually detained, at which point he introduced himself as Isam B and threatened to kill any soldier who dared to touch him. The intricacies involved with the detainment and incarceration of Isam B are myriad and highly complicated. In brief, it was determined that his targeted assassinations of soldiers constituted war crimes, rendering him a war criminal. He expressed no remorse and in fact insisted that he would continue to attack and murder soldiers regardless of their affiliation until the end of his life. It was thereafter agreed that Isam could not be incarcerated at a military prison. It also became clear that Isam was exceptionally dangerous in ways that standard incarceration facilities are distinctly unequipped to handle. As a result, the U.S. military made the decision to appeal to the Agency of Helping Hands for assistance. It should be noted that the agency was honored to step in. Upon evaluation, agency personnel discovered that Isam possesses 2 extraordinary abilities, neither of which lay entirely within his control. The first is an ability to disarm explosives. Through an unknown mechanism, his mere presence renders all explosives inert. The potential field applications for this ability are extremely exciting. For this reason, both the Agency of Helping Hands and the U.S. military hope that Isam can be successfully rehabilitated. Isam's second ability is a truly astonishing defense mechanism. In essence, Isam is untouchable. This is because any injury, attempt at inflicting an injury, or even offensive or defensive touch, triggers a stunning transformation. In simplest terms, any threatening touch turns Isam into an immensely large entity that cannot be harmed by any known conventional or unconventional means. This entity resembles a monstrous hyena. Because he transforms into this entity whenever he is threatened, Isam has been given a designation of indestructible. When not threatened, Isam typically appears as a male approximately 40 years of age. He has black hair, brown eyes, and a frail frame. Isam is highly intelligent. He is fluent in 3 dialects of Arabic as well as English, French, and Hebrew. His diagnoses include complex post-traumatic stress disorder and dissociative identity disorder. Although Isam was discovered in Aleppo, Syria, he has declined to confirm whether he is in fact a Syrian national or whether he migrated from one of the myriad unstable areas in the region that suffered during the Arab Spring and the conflicts that followed. Isam frequently insists that he has no heart. It must be noted that he is not engaging in hyperbole or allegory. Even though Isam is powerful and even though he is very much alive, he literally has no heart. His heart has been removed just as he removed the hearts of his victims. Whether he removed his own heart or whether such damage was inflicted at or after his time of death is not known. Isam has a large wound in his chest that has thus far proven resistant to all forms of treatment, including sutures, organ transplant, and more. Isam's containment protocols are simple yet exceedingly strict. No personnel are to touch him for any reason. Any touch triggers his transformation. Once transformed, he is exceptionally difficult to control and contain. In the past, his transformations have resulted in 2 staff casualties. The interviewer would like to note her strong objection to the patient's current title due to its derogatory nature and has requested an immediate change. It must be noted that in the early hours of January 16, 2025, the inmate's containment protocols were ignored. As a result, Isam broke containment. The agency's specialized interviewer, that is to say, me, interviewed him approximately 8 hours prior to his containment breach. After his escape, I was assigned to help track him and bring him back into containment. I'll be honest, I wasn't sure whether to write about his recapture before the interview or after. After dithering for a while, I decided to arrange his record chronologically. His interview happened on January 15th. His escape and subsequent recontainment happened in the early hours of January 16th. As a result, I've gone ahead and presented his interview first, followed by my direct and terrifying experience in facilitating his recapture. Interview subject: the Ghoul of Aleppo classification string, uncooperative/indestructible/chthonic/protean/severe/demon interviewer, Rochelle B. Interview date: January 15th, 25. The instant before a bomb detonates, there is a sense of perfect, profound silence. To me, this silence always feels like the opposite of an explosion. As though a miracle has caused the bomb to swallow sound and chaos instead of creating it. If you do not know better, and sometimes even if you do, you will feel relief when you hear that silence. I always felt relief. For a fraction of a second, that perfect silence always makes me believe that the bomb won't detonate. That everyone around me, on my street and in my home and in my heart, will be safe this time. That the sheer force of my belief magically makes it so. Only then does the bomb explode. I will tell you now, there is no magic in my story. There is only war. Before war, I had my hyena. Before he died, my grandfather used to tell me stories of the hyena friend he made as a little boy, years before the packs were killed or driven away. Some of my favorite memories are of sitting at his knee, listening to him recount his friendship with his hyena. I like the idea of a hyena friend. Hyenas look frightening to me in ways that little boys like to be frightened. I wanted a frightening friend. Of course, I couldn't have a real hyena, so I made myself a hyena friend. He lived in my head and I knew that, but he also felt real. Every bit as real as my family's pets. Every bit as real as me. I saw my hyena in my mind's eye as clearly as I see you in front of me. Immense and very handsome, with thick fur and bright, knowing eyes. It was important that he knew me. I never felt known, not until I made my hyena. He came with me everywhere. To school, on errands, during playtime. Sometimes he played with me, but mostly he protected me from threats as dangerous and imaginary as him. I knew he wasn't real, but he didn't need to be. He was at my side, padding along the streets, alert and watching for dangers. That was all that mattered. One day, a man followed me home from school. I only noticed him because my hyena began to growl. I turned as my hyena slid in front of me, and I saw this man. He was smiling kindly, but something in that smile made me shudder. Then my hyena barreled into him. Even though he wasn't real, the force of his body knocked the man to the ground. I ran. My hyena followed. He loped joyfully beside me, tongue lolling in a smile, fur rippling in the wind. I knew my hyena wasn't real. I wanted him to be, but knew better. I really did. I grew up knowing better because my brother Jamal didn't know the difference between what was real and what was not. He was schizophrenic. His disease was treated and well managed. He was a good boy who grew into a good man. He was never dangerous to anyone except himself, and only then when he was at his worst. But I had seen him at his worst because I had grown up with him. It was important that I saw him at his worst and that I knew how to take care of him, because I would take charge of Jamal's care one day when I was grown. I was happy to do this. I loved Jamal so much. He was my heart. So you see, I knew what Jamal suffered when he was at his worst. I've seen the agony of a mind that cannot differentiate between reality and fantasy. I was terrified of that agony. So even when I saw him, even when his fur rippled in the wind and sun, even when his bright eyes found mine, even when he smiled, even when he loped beside me everywhere I went, even when he seemed like the realest thing in the world, I made sure I always knew my hyena was not real. And indeed, he became less real as I grew up and the world around me came into focus. I grew smarter, older, and much stronger. Many young men think they can take on the world, that they are so strong and so smart and so capable that nothing and no one has any hope against them. I was one of those young men. And when you feel like you can successfully overcome the world, you have no need for help. Especially not from imaginary hyenas. And one day, there was no more hyena. There was no more hyena for a long time. Not until the war. I told you there is no magic here, and I am not sure there is even a story. No matter what anyone tells you, war is not a story. War is your world falling into chaos overnight. War is gathering all the young children in your house under a blanket fort while explosions shake your building and bombs whistle in the night so you can tell them stories to distract them, stories that make them feel safe even though that is a lie. There is no way you can keep them safe. Even the hyena watching from the corner cannot keep any of us safe. War is my oldest brother dying. He was working, not fighting, not even protesting. Fighters pulled him out into the street and shot him. War's my father screaming amidst smoking rubble, cradling his granddaughter while my hyena looks on somberly. War's watching the child's blood soak into his clothes. War is watching her flop like a rag doll as he tries to revive her. War is thinking that she does not even look real anymore. War is my brother Jamal rocking back and forth, praying and laughing and screaming to a God who has never been here. War is my sister being dragged into a riot and never emerging. War is the soldier who shot my neighbor for answering a question too nervously. War is a tangle of lies that convinces you to fight for everything except your family and yourself. Everyone lies. Lying makes the world go round. I lie. I lied to my family, and I lied to myself. Sometimes a lie is the only thing that keeps you sane. I lied that the war would be over soon. I lied that we would all be all right. My hyena used to laugh when it heard me lie that the fighting would end. He also laughed when I lied to myself that the bombs would not detonate. But they always detonate in the end. That is war. When you live in war, you compromise or you die. I compromised. I aligned myself with people who frightened me, people who hated me, people I hated. They say the enemy of my enemy is my friend, but it is not so simple. It is more like this: something out there wants to kill all of us even more than we want to kill each other. So why don't we kill it before we continue killing each other? That is war. There has always been war. But war once came in a cycle. War used to stop for a while. There was time to rebuild, to grow and regrow, to learn and to make ourselves strong before war came again. We have not had that privilege. We have only had more war. I lived in war and had no comfort except my hyena. The hyena was not real. He was my imaginary friend. I know that. But he was a wonderful friend, imaginary or not. Hyenas have a bad reputation for no reason other than tradition. They are brave, intelligent, and loyal. He was loyal to me. Even though I had outgrown him, even though I had banished him, he came back to me when I needed him. It is difficult to explain why I needed him, even to myself. I suppose he gave me something to hope for, something to focus on, something to divert my attention towards when terrible things threatened to steal everything in me and break it all apart. That is why I needed my hyena, because he held me together when everything around me was tearing me apart. After it became clear that I could not lie anymore and that the fighting would not end soon, I became a soldier. I was a good soldier. I believed the promises. I believed the lies and told my own. My hyena padded alongside me everywhere I went, an invisible guardian. He was an even better soldier than me. But being a soldier isn't a story. Being a soldier is looking upon enemies who could have been your neighbors, who maybe had been your neighbors before the war, and sauntering down to taunt them before you kill them. There is a look a soldier has, a way a soldier moves, when he knows he has control over someone he is about to kill. I watched many soldiers move that way. I moved that way more than once. Being a soldier is seeing bodies in the rubble, their skin coated in white dust. These bodies look like clowns and mannequins and toys and monsters. They look like everything but the people they actually were. Sometimes the bodies are in pieces that make no sense to the mind or the eye. Sometimes you do not even realize you were ever looking at a body or pieces of a person until hours later. Being a soldier is witnessing the aftermath of a bomb. I watched as a body was reduced to bones and vaporized flesh everywhere but her face. It happened so fast that she was still alive enough to reach for me with her burnt, fleshless fingers even as her eyes went dark. I wanted to save her. I wanted to save her so badly that I cried. My hyena looked at me. The wind ruffled his fur and deposited dust from the destruction in the corners of his eyes, but still he looked at me. Then he looked at the woman and he went to her. He nudged her head and touched his nose to hers, bright eyes shining with hope. But she stayed dead. I told you there is no magic in this story. Even my hyena is not magic. He wasn't even real. He never was. Although he stayed at my side throughout the war, although I could touch him and sink my fingers into his thick fur, even though he looked at me with bright eyes that knew me, even though I saw him everywhere I went, he was not real. Seeing him even though he was not real made me afraid sometimes. I was so frightened of losing my mind just like my brother. These things run in families. But most of the time I was just glad that he was with me. He did not have to be real because he made me feel safe. My hyena is monstrously strong. Nothing can hurt him. That is how I imagined him, so that is what he is. He was my shadow, my companion, and my protector. I needed him. As the war escalated, swallowing everything in ruin and chaos, the path of the conflict brought me near my family's home, so I went to see them. I learned that my father, my sister, and my nephews died in an airstrike. All that was left was my mother, my youngest niece, and my brother who prayed and laughed as he rocked back and forth. I couldn't stay with them. I wanted to, more than I have ever wanted anything. More than I will ever want anything. But I couldn't. All I could do was leave my heart with them, and my hyena. Before I left my family, I took my hyena's face into my hands. He felt so real. His fur, his wet nose, his bright knowing eyes, and all the rest of him seemed more real than I have ever felt. I looked into his bright eyes and ordered him to stay with my family. I told him he must protect them as he protected me. He touched his nose to mine and rested his head on my shoulder. That felt real, too. I left him there. I went back to the war by myself. The fighting did not break, but it splintered. There was no common goal anymore, no plan, nothing to fight except everything. There was not even compromise. There was only war. Once it splintered enough, I went home. But home was gone. I picked my way through the scorched, hollow ruins of the building, looking for someone. Something. Anything. All I found was my hyena, perched mournfully on the exposed second floor with tears streaming from his bright, dark eyes. I did not protect them, those eyes told me. I could not protect them. No one can protect anyone. That is war. I told you there is no magic here. My hyena leapt down, fur rippling, and landed at my side. He pressed his nose against my hand. Just a familiar burst of laughter echoed through the ruined street. My heart seemed to swell, not with joy, but with desperation. I was afraid that the laughter wasn't real, that I was hearing things now as well as seeing them. But I followed the sound anyway. The laughter echoed so madly it seemed to come from 100 places at once, but slowly, 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 and with the help of my hyena, the sound grew louder. Finally, I found the right direction. Except for the laughter, the world was silent. The same perfect silence that comes before a bomb explodes. With each step, the laughter grew sadder and louder. Finally, I turned a corner. There, huddled in the smoking ruins of what had once been a restaurant, was my brother Jamal. I ran to him, sliding on rocks and rubble made slick by blackened cooking oil. He looked at me, eyes wide and mad and broken. "Are you real?" His voice trembled. "Are you?" My voice did not tremble. It broke. His thin chest heaved. His laughter changed to sobs. Then he uttered a prayer and hurled himself into my arms, weeping. We wept together while my hyena kept watch. I knew we had to get out of the city. We had to get out of the country if we could. I no longer knew which side was winning the war, or how long they would keep winning. Jamal didn't know either. To be frank, we didn't care. No matter who was winning, no matter who won, Jamal and I had already lost. All that mattered was that we not lose each other. I planned a way out. I knew my way to the refugee camps at the border. I knew how dangerous it would be. At that point, leaving the city was as dangerous as staying. But if we stayed, we would almost certainly die. If we could get out and get to a camp, we would almost certainly live. My brother wouldn't leave until we'd searched the ruins of our family's house for keepsakes. Most were destroyed, but he found a necklace belonging to our mother and a handful of damaged photos. He put the necklace around his own throat and stuffed the photos into my pocket. Then he searched the home again, just to make sure we hadn't missed anything. When he found nothing, we set off. My hyena loped ahead, bright eyes scanning for dangers. Even though I knew he was not real, I was glad to have him near. Real or unreal, he is the only thing that has ever made me feel safe. It took days. Jamal and I picked our way through fires, ruins, riots, and knots of soldiers from every faction I knew and a few that I didn't, or had maybe simply forgotten. At the end of the second night, near dawn on the third day, we finally reached a checkpoint. The soldiers manning it were armed. I thought nothing of it. It was war. What soldier isn't armed in war? I did not recognize them, but I recognized their uniforms because I had so recently worn one just like it. We fought for the same side. This was such an immense relief. I approached the checkpoint with my hands up. Jamal raised his arms too, showing we had no weapons and meant no harm. The soldiers pointed their guns at us. Jamal began to laugh, then pray to the God who has never been here. My hyena drew up beside me, coming between me and the soldiers just as he once came between me and a man with a dangerous smile. His presence gave me strength. They demanded my name. I told them. They asked if I was a soldier. Yes, I said. I'm a soldier, just like you. I fought with you. We're on the same side. The soldiers told me, everyone says that. They looked at each other, then they sauntered toward Jamal and me. There is a look a soldier has and a way a soldier moves when he knows he has control over someone he is about to kill. I told you I have watched many soldiers move that way. I have moved that way more than once. These soldiers were moving that way now, and they were moving toward Jamal and me. My hyena snarled. My heart swelled, not with happiness but with rage. It swelled so much I felt it press against my ribs and crush my lungs. My hyena grew too, as though he were swelling alongside my heart. We're on the same side, I said again. Jamal kept praying and laughing. We fought together. I fought with men you knew. I might have even have fought with you. Jamal gave a high-pitched laugh that turned into a sob. Then, with no warning, he dropped his hands to grab our mother's pendant. The soldier pulled the trigger. There was a moment of perfect, profound silence. For an instant, a fraction of an instant, I thought the bullets would not fire. That Jamal and I were safe. That magic had finally come. Then the gunfire exploded. Jamal crumpled to the ground. My hyena leapt in front of me. Bullets tore him apart. He was not real. My hyena is not real, but I still felt his blood splatter across my face. My hyena did not seem to realize that he was torn apart. Bleeding bright ribbons, he laughed and launched himself through the darkness, knocking the soldier to the ground. Laughing all the while, my hyena tore out the man's throat. My heart swelled again, finally with joy, because even though it was far too late, I thought that the magic had finally come. Until I closed my eyes and opened them again, and I realized I was straddling the dead and bleeding soldier. Until I saw that I was looking down as blood gushed from his ruined throat. Until I tasted his blood and the flesh on my tongue. Until mad, wild laughter exploded out of my own throat. The other soldier shot me. The bullets tore me to bleeding ribbons, but I did not feel them. I did not even realize I had been torn apart until after I killed them all. I tore out their throats with my teeth and broke their ribs apart with my hands and took their hearts, just as they had taken mine. I put their hearts in my pockets. The blood ruined the photos Jamal had salvaged from our home. I wanted to care, but could not. The photos were nothing. The people in them were gone. The photos were only reminders of war. I did not need those reminders. I am already made of war. When those soldiers were all dead, I found more to kill. There were so many soldiers, so many fighters. Some I fought with, some I fought for, some I fought against. It did not matter. All soldiers are war, and I am done with war. When I attacked them, they always shot me. Their bullets tore me to ribbons but did not kill me. Something with no heart cannot be killed because it is already dead. Besides, every time they shot me, every time they grabbed me, every time they hit me, every time they touched me to hurt me or defend themselves from me, my hyena came out to protect me. That is the only good thing to come of war. My hyena finally became real, just as he deserved. He was always realer than real to me. Now he is realer than real to all of you, too. Asterisk, 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 I can't even think about that interview without wanting to cry. So it figures that about 8 hours after I finished it, some dumbass employee got into a fight with Isam. The fight made him morph into his indestructible monster form, and he broke containment. Within an hour, the director assigned me to Isam's recapture mission. In light of your recent promotion to A class, it only makes sense, he said. I was absolutely horrified, but had no choice. And believe it or not, it was considered a simple mission. And in some ways, I guess it was. Since we can't grab Isam, pin him, or even handcuff him, recontainment protocol for Isam is unique, but really kind of easy. Protocol requires a huge, specially designed steel cage with a large entry and a much smaller exit at the back, as well 4 team members. 2 team members act as reinforcement and backup. 1 team member, in this instance, Christoph, mans the large front door. And 1 team member acts as bait to lure Isam into the cage. I was the bait. The excuse given was that I'm the only staff member small enough to squeeze through the tiny door in the back. That's important, because even in his frenzied transformed state, Isam won't enter the cage unless his target is already inside it. So as was the plan, I lure him into the cage through the main opening. Once he's inside, Christoph slams the front grate shut. I then exit the much smaller back grate, which is way too small for Isam to exit easily, and close that grate before he can wriggle out after me. Basically, I was assigned to stand in the cage until he came after me, at which point I was supposed to slip out the back before he hurt me. Under the circumstances, the agency made me practice before we deployed. They set up the crate, put me inside, and had Christoph pretend to attack while I tried to escape out the small back opening and slam it shut. It took me 17 tries to beat him out, and another 60 to manage 3 times in a row. Administration decided that was as good as I was going to get, and sent us out to catch Isam. Before we left, They dressed me in fatigues and gave me a fake set of dog tags. Since Isam only targets military personnel, it was their way of ensuring he came after me. Based on our location, there was really only one place the agency expected him to be, an abandoned Air Force base less than an hour from our facility. And sure enough, the minute we arrived, before I even got out of the vehicle, I heard wild laughter echoing from the hangar. Shrill, sonorous, inhuman. That was good because it meant he was still in his monster form. Even though Isam more dangerous that way, he's much easier to manipulate. And in his monster form, he's way too big to escape through the crate's small door. We unloaded the crate and carried it into the hangar. The moment we opened the door, heavy footsteps echoed on the far end. Deep in the shadows, I caught the dim reflection of eyes. We worked quickly, setting up the crate near the doorway. I climbed inside immediately, hoping that the sight of me would be enough to lure him. It didn't work. Isam prowled along the far wall, eyes shining. At the commander's instruction, I got out of the crate and repositioned myself about 10 yards away. Laughter filled the hangar as Isam's massive shadow shifted far ahead. I saw his eyes, shining like dim, dirty mirrors. Beneath those eyes glinted a rictus of teeth. His laughter came again, louder and deeper than ever. Gooseflesh erupted along every inch of my body. His massive form dipped low. I backed away. He pounced. I turned and ran. He hit the ground so heavily the building quaked. Another explosion of resonant laughter made my bones shudder as I tore my way across the hangar and up into the cage. He leapt after me with such force that the crate rocked and threatened to tip over, knocking us both off balance. He was so intent he didn't notice. He also didn't notice when Christoph slammed the main door shut. I don't even know how, I guess because he'd been knocked over and was a wild tangle of limbs, but I squirmed out the back and slammed the door just as he wrapped an enormously long hand around the frame, preventing it from closing. He started to push back. In a panic, I slammed the grate again and again to force him to let go, but he wouldn't, even after one of his fingers snapped. The bone broke up through his skin, but he didn't seem to notice. He kept pushing back, laughing. Christoph hurled himself against the door, smashing it shut and crushing Isam's hand. He roared with pain as tears stung my eyes. But within seconds, that howling turned to laughter. When we loaded him up for transport, the permanent wound in his chest has caught the light. It was enormous, hollow, and dark. It made me want to cry. It must have shown in my face, because Christoph said, "Welcome to A-Class. Now get in the truck." I won't lie. I'm still fucked up. I'm probably going to stay that way for a while. Now it's time for sleep. See you tomorrow.